So for those of you who've never heard of us or are not too familiar, we're the Canadian Wildlife Federation. We're a conservation organization, one of the largest ones in Canada with over 300,000 members. And our mission is to conserve wildlife and habitat for future generations. And we do this through a variety of education programs. We have a lot of best practices that we tell people what to do concerning conservation. And we do support wildlife research in Canada. So today you're here to learn about helping bees in the garden, and you'll have to excuse my voice. I just have a bit of a cold, so just bear with me on that one. So today we're going to look at bees in Canada, why to help them, some of the features and benefits of a wildlife-friendly garden, which is also a bee-friendly garden, and some features that are specific to bees that you can put in your garden. And then I'll show you a few of our resources that you can use to get started. So we have approximately 1,000 bee species in Canada, and that's just an estimate. So there are many, many bees in Canada. We all kind of see, these little guys hanging around, so bumblebees and honeybees, and we all think maybe bees are just one variation of those or another. But in reality, we have many, many different types of bees. So I said there's about 1,000 species of bees. Here are a few different types of families. So we have sweat bees, mason bees, mining bees, and plasterer bees, and they're all different to the honeybees and bumblebees we're familiar with. Sometimes we may mistake these guys for flies because they can be a lot tinier, but they all have different unique habits. For example, the mason bee is a great pollinator for fruit trees, and while the plasterer bee is a ground nesting bee with really cute heart-shaped eyes. So a little bit more about our native bees. Honeybees are actually from Europe, so they're not native to Canada. But we do have many, many native bees, as you just saw on the slide before that gave you a few examples. And our native bees are really important pollinators because for a few reasons. One is that they are active in cooler temperatures before the honeybees. So while the honeybees are still waiting to warm up, our pollinators, our little native bees, can get out and start pollinating before honeybees. And they often tend to specialize on just one or two plants. So they're very, very effective at what they do pollinate. And they're also far less defensive. So if you are a person who is afraid of bee stings, or if you know someone who is afraid of bees because they may sting, you can let them know most of our native bees are solitary nesters. So that means that they don't have a big hive to protect, so they're less likely to sting you as a result. And furthermore, some of these bees have a stinger that isn't even strong enough to puncture human skin. So the fear of bees doesn't have to be. Okay, so why help bees in your garden? Well, you're creating super important habitat that may not otherwise exist, and you're supporting not just bees, but all kinds of pollinators. Bees in Canada are the most important pollinators, but butterflies are also important. Hummingbirds, beetles, and flies all play a really great part. It can be super fun and rewarding also to help bees in your garden. You plant your flowers, you see them grow throughout the season, and then you get a bloom and a bee visits it, and everybody's happy. And I'm sure most of you have heard that in the media lately, bees are declining. So we'll look at this a little bit more. So why are they declining? Well, there isn't a clear-cut answer, but you may have heard of colony collapse disorder. So this is the term used to describe massive amounts of honeybees, entire colonies just collapsing, just totally dying off. And this might be because of some pesticides or insecticides. It could be because of different infections. Infections with mites, different fungal, bacterial diseases. It can weaken their immune system. But the truth is that there is a lack of science to back up what's really going on. But the safe bet is to avoid pesticides in your garden. That's the best that you can do there. So now we'll look at the features of a wildlife-friendly garden. And again, these overlap with what a bee-friendly garden can be. And we actually have a really wonderful program. If you are interested in wildlife-friendly gardening or bee gardening or butterfly gardening or whatever it is that you like best, we can certify your property, and it's a really easy process. You just have to visit our website. And if you have any questions about it, again, feel free to type it in the chat, or I will leave my email at the end of the presentation so you can contact me that way. So the features of a wildlife-friendly garden are to meet the basic needs of wildlife. So we're talking about providing them with a source of food, water, shelter, and of course the space. So the space can be large or small, it can be a huge garden, or it can be just a tiny balcony. So we're pretty flexible on that one. You're going to want to incorporate native plants, because these are plants that have evolved in the natural world with these animals for hundreds and thousands of years. So they know how to best use these. And I just read this morning that bees are 4 times more likely to visit a native plant than a non-native plant. So those are some pretty significant results. And of course, wildlife-friendly gardening means earth-friendly gardening or organic gardening. And just to elaborate on that, what is earth-friendly gardening? You're going to want to avoid pesticides and herbicides, insecticides, all those things. And this is especially true when you're gardening with bees in mind, because they can be very susceptible to the effects of these chemicals. You're also going to want to use natural pest control in your garden, and we have a wonderful handout on that. So again, you can email me if you're interested in learning more about natural pest control. Organic gardening often means composting, so really enriching the soil and improving the quality of the soil to in turn give you some gorgeous plants. Green lawn care, so not worrying too much about all the weeds in your lawn, and also just mowing your lawn and leaving the clippings where they lie is kind of the best way to fertilize your yard. Conserving water is also part of earth-friendly gardening. So you're going to want to put out some rain barrels, maybe put down some mulch in your garden to reduce the amount that you have to water plants. And in fact, most native plants don't need very much water once they're established. So using native plants is another wonderful way to be an earth-friendly gardener. So some of the benefits to you: rich soil. So we talked about the compost or manure, whatever you like to use in your soil. So when you're building up the soil in organic gardening, you're automatically going to get some great results with your plants, and your neighbors will be envious of all of your plants. Helping wildlife helps us as well. So today we're talking about bees, pollinators. The services that pollinators offer us are unparalleled. We couldn't replace that service. We couldn't really do it ourselves. It would cost way too much money and would be very ineffective. Native plants are also really beautiful. A lot of times when people talk about wildlife-friendly gardening, we forget to mention that the native plants are actually really gorgeous choices, just as pretty as anything else you could find at a nursery. With wildlife-friendly gardening, you're saving water, you're saving time, you're saving effort and money. So I think any gardener can appreciate that. And of course, there's lots of satisfaction in knowing that you're doing something, that you love, but is also great for wildlife. So now we'll look specifically at what you can do for bees. You're going to want to provide them with a source of water, and this is true of any wildlife-friendly garden. But with bees, a really fun thing you can do is just provide a really shallow dish of water with a few little stones that they can use as a perch, and then they will just come in and drink up a bit of water. And some scientists have said that bees don't drink very much water, but I've seen a few cases where they have, and other scientists have said that they use the water to help cool down the hive, so that would be in the case of honeybees. But either way, I think it's a wonderful thing to provide. So if you can't have a pond, which if you look at the picture here, this is the pond that we're lucky enough to have with our native plant demonstration gardens. But if you can't do a pond, something as simple as a dish will do. You're going to want to provide some really wonderful foraging sites for bees too. So the important thing to do here, or to keep in mind when you're choosing a spot, is that you want a spot that's really sunny, but that is somewhat sheltered too. So you can keep it very simple and keep a nice flower garden. It can be a container garden, really something really tiny, or you can have a flower garden as big or as small as you like. And the advantage here is that you get to really choose the plants and the design and how it looks. And of course, it can be any size. Or another alternative is to plant a wildflower meadow. So if you have a larger scale of land and you want to kind of restore it to a natural state and make it effective for pollinators, you can create a whole wildflower meadow. And the advantage here is that this is very low maintenance once it's established, and it can cover quite a large area. So if you would like more information on wildflower meadows, we do have a wonderful article on our website. And again, you can just contact me after the presentation. So you're planting your garden or you're growing your meadow, but how do you choose the plants? Which plants will be best for the bees that are going to be visiting? Well, I will always say, and CWF always advocates, regionally native plants, and of course heirloom plants too. So again, this helps local wildlife because they've evolved with these plants for hundreds, thousands of years. So they're definitely a good choice. And not to say that you can't include your favorite other varieties, but certainly including native plants will go a long way. You're also going to want to have a great diversity of nectar and pollen-rich plants for the bees to come and collect all their pollen. You're going to want to consider all kinds of different sizes and shapes of flowers. So some bees have a really short tongue and others have a long tongue. So the shorter tongued, smaller bees can access nectar and pollen from all kinds of plants like a rose or a sunflower. And then some of the longer tongue bees might like a longer tube flowers like bee balm or obedient plant. So that's another thing to consider too. For the different size of bees, you want different size and shape of tubed flowers. You're also going to want to have continuous blooms from early spring to late fall, and I'll show you, excuse my voice, a few examples in the next few slides. Another little tip is to plant in large groups of plantings when you're putting your garden in. So in landscape design, usually you're going to be planting plants in groups of 3 or 5 or 7 anyways. But this not only looks pretty, but it will help attract the bees to your garden. And bees apparently can't see red. So they prefer blue, purples, yellow, and white. They tend to see those a little bit better. But from my experience, they'll go to just about anything. So here are a few examples of some spring blooms that you can plant on your property or in your meadow or however you would like to undertake this. So willow trees are fantastic. Wild geraniums, things like violets are great too. Cherry trees, apple trees, those are all wonderful spring blooming plants. Summer blooms include wild rose, some bee balm or anything in the Monarda family. Button bush is a good one too. Excuse me. Sorry. Button bush is a fantastic bush to include in your property. If you have kind of a wet spot in your yard, I really highly recommend button bush. They have these really cool kind of white pom pom flowers that they're among my favorites, and often bees are, I can see bees buzzing around them, so they're wonderful. And of course, coneflowers are great too, all kinds. This is echinacea or purple coneflower, but any of the yellow coneflowers or any of the ones that you probably already have in your garden are fantastic for bees too. Some late summer or early fall blooms that you're going to want to have are goldenrod, some asters. We have the purple New England aster here, Joe Pye weed, which looks a bit like milkweed. Those are both great plants to include. And fall sunflowers are really fantastic as well. And not only do these provide beautiful color for late into the fall, they help the bees and actually a lot of other little pollinators that are out late in the year. So we'll talk about nesting sites next, but it is important to note that your food and nesting sites should be fairly close together. So within 250 meters, we say roughly, because the bees will not forage that far out from where they're nesting. So now when talking about nesting sites, I'll give you a few ideas of how you can create some nesting sites. So all those wonderful flowers that you're including are great, and those can help increase bee populations, but nesting sites are probably even more important or equally important. So those are the two main components you want to think about when gardening for bees. So for some bees, they like to have a nice muddy spot where they can collect mud and bring that back to their nest, because some of these solitary nesting bees, so they're not like the typical honeybee where we think of with a hive, they have a single nest to themselves. They actually can use mud to construct their nest for the little eggs that they're going to lay. So mason bees do this. So if you leave a little bare spot of mud in your yard, who knows, but they may use it as construction material. For some other bees that are ground nesting bees, you're going to want to have a bit of bare sandy soil in kind of a well-drained site. So a south-facing slope is best, but basically anywhere where there's a bit of sun and some poor quality soil on a bit of a slope, they will dig there. And you would think they're so tiny, and how can they possibly dig a little burrow in the ground? But they do. I've seen it in our pollinator garden on site here, and it's pretty remarkable. These little guys can dig better than I can sometimes, so it's pretty cool to see. And if you don't have kind of a south-facing slope, or if you don't have these conditions, you can create it yourself. So you can create a mound with, whatever kind of sandy clay type soil that you have around. We have a recommendation here about 60 centimeters high and 1.5 meters wide, but you can always experiment with this and see what works best, and that can be a lot of fun too. Talking about nesting sites some more, for bumblebees, you're going to want to leave some areas of overgrown grass. So, when you've got a big grass tussock that comes up like that, oftentimes rodents will burrow beneath there, and then once the rodents evacuate, the bees will use their nests. Little bumblebees like to use rodent nests. So that's one way to support bumblebees. You can also leave a corner of your yard just to grow wild with whatever vegetation wants to grow there, whatever kind of grass. You can do that. For cavity nesting bees, logs and old stumps are great. So if you want to decorate your garden a bit, you can stick some logs and old stumps in there, and it kind of looks nice, and it can provide a great nesting spot for some bees. Shrubs and different perennial flowers with kind of like a thicker stem that's hollowed in the middle can provide some great nesting sites for bees. So things like cup plant, or of course raspberry canes are really great. So we recommend that you leave these things in your garden kind of over winter. So typically we have fall cleanup or a spring cleanup. In wildlife-friendly gardening, we do recommend a spring cleanup so that all the wonderful kind of plant stalks can be used by different bees or other insects to overwinter. So they're nesting sites, but they're also overwintering sites. So that's kind of neat. You can always make or buy a nesting home too for these kind of cavity nesting bees. So things like mason bees and leafcutter bees. And here are some examples of things that people have either made or purchased. And you can see some of them are very, very simple, and others are very elaborate. Like there's this bee hotel that's super huge. So it looks kind of neat, but probably the best thing that you can do is, if you want to create these bee homes, is to make several smaller bundles, kind of like the photograph you see on the bottom, where this man is holding a pack of bamboo sticks, and they're just simply taped together. And you can scatter these throughout your garden or your yard. And the reason I say having several small little bundles is best is because it can help reduce the spread of different diseases, including mites or fungus or anything that might plague bees. But any of these will be fine, and really fun to watch them come in and move in. So if you'd like some specific instructions on how you can make a bee home, I'll just read this slide for you. So you're going to want to have a 4x6 wood block. So it has to be large enough. So about 15 centimeters at least. And this can be anything. You can buy a wood block, or it can be any kind of scrap or log. Anything that you have on hand is fine. But you're only going to want to drill the holes about 90% of the way into the blocks, or if you do drill all the way through, you're going to want to put a nice back on there, because the bees won't use it otherwise. They need a backing to the wood block, or to the nesting block. You're going to want to have drill holes of varying diameter, anywhere from 3 millimeters wide to 10 millimeters in diameter. And you might think, oh, that's really tiny, but they will manage just fine. And the greater diversity of the hole diameter that you have, the greater the diversity of bee species that you will attract. So one issue with with the bee homes that you can purchase is that they are typically made just for one type of bee. So often these days, they're made for an orchard bee. So this is a bee that comes out in early spring and pollinates fruit trees, and that is wonderful. But of course, the more types of bees you can attract, the better for your property, right? The more things will get pollinated. And so where should you put this bee home? We recommend kind of a shady, dry spot. You can kind of tuck it beneath your shed if you'd like. East facing is best, so they're getting the morning sun and they're not going to get toasted in the middle of the day with the super hot sun. But you can, again, just experiment with which spots work better for whatever reasons. And another thing to note too is that the straws or the holes that you're drilling should be parallel to the ground. So you don't want to have them vertical but parallel, right? So that's a good thing to know too. Another feature that's really fantastic for bee gardens are overwintering sites. And oftentimes bees do overwinter as eggs. So we talked about leaving the garden clean up until spring, so leaving all those stalks in your garden to give a chance for bees to overwinter. These are the solitary bees that will overwinter as little eggs and then emerge in the spring as full-grown adults. Another thing you can do is leave all kinds of leaf litter on your property or in your garden, and this serves as a really great mulch that will protect your flower bed, and it will provide nutrients to the soil when it breaks down. But for the winter, it really helps bees like bumblebees overwinter, because bumblebees do actually overwinter as adults. Most of the colony dies off, but the queen will overwinter and emerge next spring and then start a new hive. So just a really quick overview, the best way that you can help increase bee populations is, of course, to use some wildlife-friendly gardening techniques, and especially avoiding pesticides. Plant a diversity of native plant flowers that will really help them a lot with their foraging, and maintaining or creating nesting grounds is really fantastic as well to help bees in the garden. So there you have it. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat, or again, you can contact me at any time. I think you can make a request to raise your hand. So if you do that, I can enable your mic. And yeah, so hopefully we can just have a little discussion that way. So now that I've told you a little bit about helping bees in the garden, I hope that you will share, the importance of these little guys, and let your family and friends know what they can do. And if they see you're doing something that they think looks funny in your yard, it's a great opportunity to explain to them, what that weird little birdhouse with all the holes is. It's, place for bees to nest. A bit about our gardening programs. We have a wonderful online community of wildlife-friendly gardeners, and it's called Over the Garden Fence. So here you can go and share all your wildlife-friendly gardening tips and tricks, stories, pictures, whatever you like, with all kinds of gardeners from across Canada. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have our wildlife-friendly certification program. So if you want to garden for bees or any other wildlife species, and you've taken, some pretty significant measures to make your yard wildlife friendly, tell us all about it, and we would love to certify you. Visit wildaboutgardening.org for all kinds of really great information to help, help get you along with your bee gardens. we have a really wonderful native plant encyclopedia. So I was talking about native plants a whole lot, and if you're wondering which one should you include and which ones will grow best in your area in a sunny spot or a shady spot, you can go to this encyclopedia and we will give you all the info you need there. We also have a native plant supplier list, so if you're clueless as to where to get these things, we do have a list that will get you started there. Also, Google is a fantastic resource. And we do have a quarterly newsletter, so you can keep in touch with us that way. So here's my email as promised. If you have any questions or if you'd like any more information about natural insect control, certification, or gardening for bees, or anything else, just give me a shout. Thank you so much for listening in. I really appreciate this, that you stopped by and took the time out. So I'll wait a couple minutes, and if there are any questions, I'll answer those. Otherwise, have a fantastic day. So somebody asked about different species of bees and if they don't mind nesting together. Nope, the different species of bees won't mind nesting together. Even though they are solitary nesting bees, each little drilled hole will be just for one bee. So that shouldn't be too much of an issue. I'm sure there are certain species of bees that do mind nesting together and they will simply find a different spot to nest, but for the most part, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. So thank you for that question. That was great. Okay, and so we have another question about how far off the ground should the nest be. Generally, it doesn't matter how high off the ground it is. They will come to it either way, if it's super high up or low down, but you will want it at least a couple feet off the ground, just to ensure that moisture, if it's raining, that it doesn't splash up and it doesn't moisten the nest. So I hope that answers that question. See, somebody else is typing, so you can just hang on a moment if you'd like. Otherwise, you can carry on about your day. So somebody is asking about bees overwintering and how do they overwinter. So it's like hibernating. And in order to survive the winter, they have to have a strategy. And in Canada, it's really cold. So most of our native bees will overwinter as eggs. So basically what happens is in the spring and summer and fall, the mother bee, I guess you could call her, will go and collect a forage for pollen and nectar, and then she'll come back to her nest. So the mason bees and those types of bees that will nest in those artificial wood blocks or that nest in the stems of plants will typically kind of build little chambers for their eggs. So the bee will go in and create one little cell with mud or leaves or whatever that bee species likes, lay one egg, and she'll put down some pollen and nectar in the chamber as well, because that's what the little developing bee will eat. So she does this, and she may create 6 or 8 chambers in one stem, and then with time, the little tiny egg will of course become a pupa and a larva. So they undergo different stages in their life cycle until they become an adult bee. But most of these bees will overwinter as the little eggs. But in the mother bee that laid the eggs will actually die off during the winter because it's too cold. But her eggs will survive, And then come springtime, the eggs will hatch and go through different insect stages until they are an adult bee, and then they fly out and then repeat the cycle. And as I mentioned, other kinds of bees can overwinter by just kind of burying themselves in the leaf litter. Bumblebees are a type of native bee that we have in Canada that do nest in a hive or a colony, like how we think of honeybees. And what happens with that hive is most of the hive will die off in the winter because of the cold temperature. But typically the queen bee will, or the new queen bee, I should say, will hibernate in leaf litter. So, creatures have wonderful ways of surviving in Canada. Some species of frogs have a type of antifreeze that goes through their blood, so they look frozen, but their inside metabolism is just slowed down. It's not frozen, and then they emerge. So I would imagine that bees do something very similar, these bumblebees that do overwinter. So hopefully that answers that a little bit more. So if there are no other questions, I will leave you at that. But again, feel free to contact me. And I really appreciate you taking the time to listen today. If you'd like, we have a wonderful bee poster, and I can send you that. And we have a new pollinator poster as well. So again, just email me and we can make that happen. So thank you very much. You've been a great audience. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.